We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Roberson Museum and Science Center online Scratch workshop. We're so excited you're here. My name is Annie Glasgow, and I am an educator with the Roberson Museum. It's been so fun to host these online, so we still get to have some educational resources and connect with you guys. We are doing them every Thursday at 11 a.m. So make sure to check out for the coming week's workshops as well. Okay, like I said, if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and go to scratch.mit.edu. And if not, you can feel free to just watch and learn, take notes, and then we will be posting this later today. All right, if you want to communicate with me one last time, please do it in the chat box so we can make sure to keep everybody's audio down and everybody on the same track. Okay. So Scratch is an online coding platform that was designed by MIT specifically for kids. So it's a really good way to start coding. You can create your own storylines, you can create animations, you can even create simple video games. So it's really good for a starter programmer, somebody who's interested in coding for the first time, but it's also, once you get used to it and get the hang of it, you can create quite complicated projects with it. So it's really good for a wide range of ability levels. Okay. If you are on this website, you can create your own account. You don't need to just to get started and to play with it. But if you want to save programs and you want to come back to them later, you do need to create an account to do that. But for right now, since we're just playing, we can go ahead and hit create. And you'll see this screen come up. So there's a couple different parts of this screen. This here is where your actual program will be running. This is your workspace. This is where we're going to be placing our codes. And over here are all of your coding options. So the way Scratch works is with these drag and drop blocks. Right? I just got a question asking where I was going to post the video. We will post it to the event page. Online on Facebook, and I think it might also go out in an email. I will check with that, but we'll definitely be posting on the event page. All right, so like I said, these are the coding blocks. When you drag these into the workspace, it's going to apply to whatever we have in here. Our sprite is what we call our main object or character. All right. So we can start by practicing with some simple basic codes. The first thing I want us to do is just drag this move 10 steps into the workshop space. All right. So if I click it, you'll see that my little sprite moves 10 steps, and he is moving in the right direction. So unless we specify a direction, he's just going to go forward. All right, so I can click, 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 and it is moving my sprite 10 steps. Now the fun thing about Scratch is that you can attach more codes to this. So I want to have it actually play a sound. I can go here, and there's already sounds attached to my sprite. So you'll see here in the sound category, it says play sound meow until done. If I attach this here and I click it, you can hear a little cat meow. There's other extensions that you can add on. So if you wanted to do music, down in this bottom left corner, you see this plus with the little blocks. This has different extensions. So Scratch can also connect to different technologies. If you've ever heard of a Makey or Arduino sets, all of those can be connected to the Scratch programming language. But there's also just fun extensions like music. So if I click on the music tab, and I don't want a meow, I can have him play a drum. Now you'll see that within each of these blocks, there's little circles. For instance, this here says move 10 steps. If I wanted to change it and make it move less or more, I can change that number. So just by typing in my keyboard, I typed 15 instead, and now he'll move a little farther. Same way here, I'm gonna make this a little smaller. Right now it says 1 snare drum. I can change what sound it's going to make by clicking that down arrow. And I can also change the number of beats that it's going to play for. Okay, so now if I click it, You can hear that it's doing a slight snare drum. Let's see if I can turn it up. And moving 15 steps. I'm going to make my guy do a little dance. We can kind of simulate an animation. So let's say he's moving forward 15 steps. What if we want him to move backwards? I'm going to go back to the motion tab and actually grab this same move 10 steps and attach it again. But instead of positive 10 steps, I want him to move backwards. If in school you remember in math learning about a coordinate grid, this works in the same way. So if you imagine a y-axis and an x-axis, our positive numbers are going to be going this direction to the right, and our negative numbers are going to the left. So if I want him to move backwards, I'm going to type negative 15. And we can click it and see what happens. So you see he moves 15 forward, it plays the sound, and then he moves 15 back. The good thing about Scratch is that it's really easy to test what you're working on. So you don't have to write an entire line of code and then find out that it hasn't done what you want it to do. Just as you're creating it, you can test it, alter it, make sure it's working exactly the way you want it to. Let's go ahead and add in another music note. I'm going to change this one to be maybe a tambourine and see if I like that. So if I was to repeatedly click this, it kind of starts to look like an animation, but I don't want to have to sit here and keep clicking it over and over and over again. So instead, I can add some controls and some events. Okay, so if we go to event, I can choose when the program is going to do this. So let's say I want it to happen when the flag is clicked. You'll see the flag here. This is usually the button that we use to go. That's the start program button. So then instead of having to click on my actual code block, I can just click on the flag. But still, it's only doing it once in a row. That's where our control keys can come in. If you click on the control tab, you'll see a bunch that are all relating to when the program is going to run. So there's the repeat codes. So you'll see this one has a space for you to insert blocks within it. I'm going to drag this, and if you kind of hover it over, you can see there's a dark gray showing you what it's going to put within. So I click that there, and now what's going to happen, if we follow along with the code, is when the flag is clicked, it's going to repeat whatever is within this bracket 10 times. So we can again test it. And it's going to go on forever. And if I don't want to listen to it go on forever, you can hit the stop button whenever you want it to stop. All right, so now that's the start of a very simple application, animation rather, right? We see him, he's dancing on his own. I don't have to keep clicking the button. The program is just running independently. You don't have to attach the code though to the green flag. If we go back into events, we can make lines of code run when I hit different keys on my keyboard. So for example, when the space key is pressed, I can make something happen. I think since he's kind of like a dancing cat right now, I want him to start changing colors like a disco ball. So if I want my sprite to change appearance or anything that has to do with appearance, whether it's color or size, it's going to be in the looks tab. Okay. If we go to looks, you'll see there's a lot of different options. You can make him say things, which actually let's throw that in there. Maybe in a minute. We'll go ahead and do the color effect first. So yeah, there's things that he can say. There's different costumes, which we'll get to later on when we're actually working on our video game or maybe on our dancing animation. But we're going to go to this change color effect and attach it right there. Now I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to hit my space bar and you can see what happens. So rather than this code being controlled by the program running, it's controlled by my keyboard. You don't have to do the space key. you can choose any key on your keyboard and assign a code to it. So later when we do a video game, this is going to come in handy because we don't always want it to just run independently. We want the program to do something when I click something. In other words, if I click the arrow key, I want my sprite to move in a direction. So that's where these event tabs really come in handy. And then let's go ahead and test out for fun one of these looks, say hello for a certain number of seconds. So again, it's really easy to edit and alter the Scratch code as you're in here. If we go in, I can put this wherever I want. So maybe I'll put it right at the beginning before he starts dancing. So again, you can read it just like a book, up to down. When this is clicked, he'll say hello for 2 seconds. If I wanted to change that, I could. Maybe I'll say, I love to dance for 2 seconds. And then he'll repeat our little dance move. And then all the while, I can hit this space bar as much as I want, and he's going to start changing color. So I'm going to hit the green flag and see how it works. All right, so there we go. We have a basic animation. He's saying something, he's changing color, he's moving around. That's a couple of the basics. But right now it still looks pretty bland, right? So that's where the backdrops come in. I gotta move my little chat box out of the way. If you look down in this bottom right corner, we have a backdrop. If you click here, oops, and you see this circle below, you can add a new backdrop. Now Scratch has lots that are already pre-made. I think I'm going to choose one of those. Concert, since he's going to be dancing. But if you were to click on this, you can see that you could also paint your own backdrop. So you can get really creative here and create whatever kind of a background you want. Okay, I'm going to put my sprite right in the middle, and he'll work just the same way. If I was to start the program, just in a new background. Okay. But let's say I also don't really like the cat all that much, or I just want to add more interest to my program or my scene or my storyline, whatever I'm making. I can add more objects, more characters as well. So I'm going to go on in here, same kind of plus sign as the backdrop, and I can choose a sprite. And you'll see the same options are here. So I can upload my own picture if I have one. I can choose a random. I can create my own, or I can choose one from their pre-made sprites. Some of these sprites, actually all of them, have an animation attached to them. So if you hover over this dinosaur, for instance, you'll see that it's kind of doing a little dance. So maybe I'll actually pick him because I think he looks pretty cute. Okay. If you put your new sprite into your scene and he seems just way too big or way too small, you can change the size right here. So here's all the basic information about your sprite. I'm going to change him down to maybe size 75, just to make him a little smaller. Okay. You'll also see here X and Y. So like I mentioned before, this Scratch program runs on a coordinate grid. You may or may not have learned it in school yet, but X is horizontal, left and right, and Y is up and down. I remember it like Y, like you're nodding yes. Y, yes, up and down. So this tells you the coordinates of your sprite. So if my guy's right here, he's at negative 133x and Y is negative 8. If this doesn't quite make sense to you, the part that really matters is if I want him to go to a certain location, I can use those numbers to get him there. So let's say that when this program starts, I want my dinosaur to glide right in. I'm going to go to my events. Oh, and another important point is that I have the dinosaur highlighted right now. Okay, if I still had my cat sprite highlighted, then that would be what I'm writing code for. But I want to switch over and write some code for my dinosaur. So I have him clicked on. When the flag is clicked, I want him to move, and I want him to glide directly to this location. And perhaps I want him to glide to there from this side. So what I'm going to do is choose where I want him to start first and place him. Then you'll see here it says he's at 183 and -32. The great thing about Scratch is that it already fills in all of your code blocks with the location that you've placed him in. So now if I click go to, it's going to go ahead and fill in those numbers. So let's say now I moved him, I hit the green flag, and he instantly went to that location. So this go to is a really good block to use when you want to choose a starting location for a sprite. But then let's say that after he starts there, I want him to glide back over to the left side of the stage. I'm going to use this glide again. If I put it there right now, it would still have this same position placed in it. So instead, I'm going to put him where I want him to glide to. And then you'll see these numbers have changed, so that's good. I can place that there. And then as always, after I've done a couple of lines of code, I want to test it. And it works perfectly. He starts where I wanted him to, and he glides right across the stage to where I wanted him to stop. If you don't remember to place these beforehand, and let's say you got in the wrong numbers here, or you just wanted it a little different, you can just go in and type different numbers for this. So either way works, to place him before and then automatically grab the code, or to place the code and then change the numbers. Either is totally fine. Okay, but now let's actually get to doing an animation with this dinosaur. The easiest animations are through the costumes. If you choose one of these pre-made sprites, usually they're different costumes. If you were to play them together, make an animation. So we'll go back to code and we're going to be utilizing that. And let me just check the chat box real quick, make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, looks good. One second. Okay, so we're going to do another event when the flag is clicked. When the flag is clicked, then what I want to happen is I want him to change his costume. All right, so again, a costume has to do with the way that he looks, his appearance. So I'm going to go to the Looks tab, and here is our switch costume. So if I just specifically wanted him to go to one or the other, I might choose that code, but I want him to continuously switch to the next costume over and over and over again. So I'm going to choose this next costume block. And like I said, I want this to happen over and over and over again. So that to me makes me think that I'm going to need a repeat code. So I can go to our Control tab again, and I could have it happen 10 times, but I just want him to keep on dancing. So I can use this forever code. If I nestle that next costume within the forever code, this will just keep cycling through the costumes. The important thing here, let me go ahead and play it. You'll see that he looks a little insane, right? That's because there is no time between each costume. It is flipping between them way, way, way too fast. So what we want is to pause between the first costume and then go on to the next. Slight pause, go on to the next. The way we can do that is with this wait block. So if I take this wait code block and I put it right there under next costume, we can think through what should happen. When I click this, it's going to forever repeat what's within this bracket, which is to switch to the next costume and wait 1 second. Switch to the next costume, wait 1 second. So we can test that out by hitting the flag. All right, so he's going. If I think that's now taking too long, I can change this. So instead of 1, maybe I'll do 0.5, which is the same as a half. Test it out again. And then he looks like he's dancing. All right, so that's the best way to do a simple animation. You can go through all of those pre-made sprites, pretty much apply this exact same code, and it's going to work. And you can see some of them dance, some of them are kicking something. There's a lot of different options there to play with. So that's a really fun way to do that. With that, those are kind of the basic codes we've gone through. So you can change the look, you can create a story, is something that a lot of people like to do, especially with these, with the say hello. You can write an entire conversation between different characters and have them move around the screen. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with just those. But I do want to walk you through actually creating a very simple video game. So again, if you wanted to save this, if you had your own username and your account set up, you can put in the title up here. So I'll just do practice, and then it will automatically save for you. But I'm going to just hit File, New. All right, and before I go on, I'll go ahead and check the chat box. And then I will bring up, get ready to go ahead and do the next code. All right, so we are going to now create a simple chase game. So the purpose of this game, it's one of the easiest games to code in Scratch, is that your character, whatever you choose to have it be, is going to be chasing a different object that's randomly moving around the screen. So there's lots of different creative ways that you can do this. You could have it be a frog that's trying to catch a beetle, or I think I'm going to do a spaceship that's trying to catch a star or a crystal, or an underwater scene. Remember that there's all of these different backdrops and sprites that you can automatically choose from. So you can really get creative with the way that you alter this basic game. Our first step is going to be to choose a sprite. I don't think I want to use the cat again. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the cat, and then, oops, my zoom window is actually blocking where I need to go. Let me see if I can get this. Oh, give me a second here. Okay. So here I'm going to go back down to this choose a sprite button, and I'm going to use one of their pre-made ones. Like I said, I think I want my game to be a rocket ship that's chasing some sort of a crystal. Maybe I'll use that crystal. So let me look for a ship. And this also gives you an idea of how many options they have for you to choose from. Let's see here. Robot, I like the rocket ship. Okay, so again, I want to think about how big is this rocket ship compared to how I want it to go around the screen. If I'm going to have it moving around, I probably want it to be a little bit smaller. So I am going to go ahead and change that size to be maybe a 60 rather than 100. All right, that's much smaller. I think it's going to give my game more space to actually run. Okay, so then, like I said before, if you're doing a video game, you don't necessarily just want this object to move on its own. So we're going to be using some of these events that relate back to the keyboard. When I hit the arrow keys, left, right, up, and down, I want that to move around my rocket ship. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this event when blank key is pressed, and I'm going to start by when the right arrow is pressed. So when the right arrow is pressed, I want my spaceship to move to the right. So I'm going to go back to my motion tab. And instead of having it just move 10 steps, which would work, in case my spaceship throughout my game gets spun in a different direction, I want to make sure that it's still going to move this way when I press the right arrow key. If it got spun and I said move 10 steps, it might wind up moving in a different direction. So if you always want it to go right or left, it's better to use the change X. Change X is going to move right and left regardless of what direction your object is actually facing. And since we want it to go to the right, I'm going to keep that as +10. Now I'm going to go ahead and check it on my keyboard. I'm hitting my right arrow key, and it does move by 10 spaces. So now you can probably guess we want to do pretty much the same thing for the left, the up, and the down. So I'm going to go ahead, since I know that I'm going to write those 3 codes, I'm going to go ahead and drag 3 of these into my workspace. And then I can change these 3 to be my left, up, and down. So we'll go left, up arrow, and the down arrow. All right, so then we need to go back to our motion tab. For my left arrow, let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit. For my left arrow key pressed, I'm still going left and right horizontal, so that means I'm in my X axis. So I'm again going to do change X by 10, but right now if I keep it at positive 10, I'm going to keep moving that way. So I want to change X by negative 10. The negative sign is the same as the subtraction sign on your keyboard. So now I can test it. Always test after you do a few lines of code. My left arrow key moves my rocket ship back, and my right arrow key moves it to the right. Okay, so for the up and downs, we don't want to use X because X is just horizontal, but Y, like you're nodding yes, is always up and down. So I'm going to go to change Y. So again, with the Y, positives are up and negatives go down. So if I want to change Y and make it move up 10, I'm going to keep it positive. But if I want, with the down arrow, to move down, instead of a positive 10, I'm going to change it to a negative 10. Okay, so now again, once you've done that with whatever your object is, we can move it around, and he moves in all directions when I'm hitting my keyboard. Okay, right now this is a little boring still, so I think I'm going to go ahead and add a backdrop. So here, press my button, choose a backdrop. You don't have to do something that makes sense. You can do whatever is silly or fun for you. I think I want him to go into the nebula. So this looks pretty cool now. But then, of course, after we have our rocket ship moving around, we need him to actually be chasing something. So your next step is going to be to decide what you want it to actually be chasing. That means we need a different sprite. Just like in the last one when we had our cat dancing and then our dino dancing, they had different lines of code. We need our chasing object to have a different line of code than our rocket ship. So I'm going to hit our new sprite, and I'm just going to pick whatever I think looks fun for him to chase. I think I saw that crystal before. Okay. So again, like before, if we want to be adding code to our crystal, make sure that your crystal is actually selected. I worked on lines and lines of code before and not realized I was on the wrong object, and that is very frustrating. So if you go ahead and click the crystal, we can start deciding what we want the crystal to do. So when the game starts, the idea is that this crystal is going to be flying all around the screen, and I'm going to have to chase it with my rocket ship. So I kind of want it to run randomly, right? Instead of having to write all this code that says, oh, this crystal is going to go to this side and then that side and then speed up and then go down, I want it to just continuously through the whole program be doing its own thing. So luckily there's some codes in here that do that. If you look right here in the motion, we have a glide, a certain number of seconds to a random position. So that's really good. It's going to go ahead and just pick a random position on its own, and it's going to go there. And then once it does that, it would stop. But if we go to our controls, we can have it repeat this forever. So now it's going to go ahead and glide 1 second to a random position, and then our code has told it, okay, repeat that same thing. So it's going to choose a different location, and it's going to glide to it. And we don't want to have to click this when we're playing the game. When the game starts, we just want it to happen. So we're going to say that events when the flag is clicked. Again, that's kind of our ultimate go signal. So when the flag is clicked, it's going to glide to a random position over and over and over again. So let's go ahead and check if that works. All right, and you can see my little crystal is bouncing around the screen. So now I can go ahead and try and chase it. But it's not much of a game right now because nothing happens when I actually do hit the crystal. So we need to add some sort of a scoring system or some sort of a sound, something to let you know that you've done it correctly. So if you want to add a sound, we need to make it happen, not just at a certain time, but when our rocket ship hits the crystal. So that's going to be using our sensing tab. And I think that we can do this code on the actual rocket ship. So I'm going to hit sensing. You can see there's lots of different options here. I'm going to grab, oh, actually we have to put in our first one, something to put it into first. So when it's touching I can hit the down arrow. We don't have anything for it to touch right now. There we go. The crystal, we want it to do something. Another way to phrase this is, if it touches the crystal, then we want it to do something. So those if-thens are going to be in control. If something happens, then we'll tell it what we want it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this. If touching crystal, I'll plug it right in there. Then I can choose whatever code I want it to do. And I think I want it to play some sort of a sound when it hits the crystal. So I can go to my sounds, plug one in there, and maybe I'll do space ripple. And we can test this out and see if it works. So I'll just put them on each other. And then, oh, so this is good. Glad this happened. Why didn't anything happen? The reason is because I didn't actually give it an event for when it would start doing this code. So I'm going to go ahead and press events, and I want this to happen all the time. So I'm going to do when flag is clicked, if it's touching the crystal, then it will make that noise. So let's try it. All right. Whoop. Let's see, okay, so now I'm going to have to problem solve. Why isn't this working for me? Maybe my volume got turned down. If touching crystal, I'm on my spaceship, play sounds. Let's have it happen forever and make sure, see if that fixes the problem, because maybe it just didn't touch it long enough. There we go. Okay, so that forever code, it kind of just makes sure that it's going to happen. It might have happened once and then it immediately left the crystal. So then it didn't actually get a chance to play the whole sound. So that forever code is going to be important there to help. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I haven't checked into the chat box in a second. So let me see if I can check. All right. Okay, so I had a question from Jacob. What are the sensing, operators, variables, and my blocks codes? As we go through this video game, we are going to be kind of exploring those different tabs. So the sensing is if it's going to actually be touching something. Those are really useful in video games, as you can imagine, because usually we're trying to catch something or you don't want to run into something. So if you want your sprite to notice when something happens, that's probably going to be in your sensing. And very soon we're going to be getting into our variables and operators. So we won't get too far ahead. We are going to use those to create a score. Right now our game works pretty well. If we hit the crystal, we have a sound, so clearly something is happening, but we want to actually be able to keep score or else it's not really a game. So what we need to do is go to our variables. Anytime you're going to have a number involved with something, you're probably going to have to create a variable. It's something that it can keep track of or that can change numerically. So we need to actually start by making a variable. If I click this button here, I can name my variable. I'm just going to go ahead and name it score. For all sprites is fine for us. And you'll see that when I did that, it went ahead and popped that variable up in the upper left corner. But we have to actually tell it when it's going to change. So we're going to add that onto our rocket ship as well. We're going to actually add it right into this code that we already made. Because this is already saying if touching crystal, it's going to play the sound. All we also want it to do is to change our variable by 1. So you can see that right here is within your variables. Change variable by 1, we'll just squeeze it right on into there. So now reading it, if touching crystal, then we are going to play the space ripple, and it's going to change. We need to change this to actually what our variable was, which is the score, by 1. And it's going to continue to do that code for the rest of the game. So now we can test it. I'm going to chase my crystal. Okay, this game was too hard. I can't catch it. Okay. Whoop. And let's see. There it went. And so then you can say it upped my score by 1. Okay. So that is the basics of how you would use an operator. And I think that what happened, it took a second for it to change the score. So this is where you have to be very specific. If you want it to immediately change your score, then you should put this first. Otherwise, it's going to wait until that entire space ripple sound is done before it changes the score. So if this one comes first, it's going to happen a little bit quicker. We can also say change score by 5, just like with any of these other coding blocks. You can go ahead and alter it to be whatever you want. Okay, so now every time I hit the crystal, it's going to hit a 5. We have a pretty good basis of a game now, but with any game, you want there to be multiple levels or a way that you actually win or progress through. So we're going to go ahead and create the next level. When we level up, we want it to change to a different backdrop. So I'm going to go to our little backdrop button, and I'm going to choose what I think I want my next level to look like. Maybe I want my guy to then make it into the galaxy. So for right now, this is fine that it switched, but we will have to tell the program which backdrop we want it to start on, and then when do we want it to change. So in order to do that, we can go back to our little rocket ship, and I'm going to say when flag is clicked. So again, that flag is clicked symbol is really good anytime you're doing something that's just from the start of the game for the rest of the game. That's the control that we want to use. So when the flag is clicked, we want our background to start at that nebula. So that's an appearance, which means it's probably going to be in the looks tab. And here it is right here, switch backdrop. So when the flag is clicked, or in other words, when the game begins, we're going to switch the backdrop to nebula. But then we eventually want it to change back to this galaxy when you've reached a certain point in the game. So we're going to go, this one's a little tricky, it's got a couple of steps. We're going to go into the control. And let me scroll down, hopefully it's here, yes it is. We're going to wait to do anything until something else happens. So we're going to wait until we reach score, let's say score 10, and then you can move on to the next. Once you've kind of gotten your variables, if you're waiting for that number to equal something or to be greater than something or less than, those are going to be in your operators. And I know that was one of the questions. So once you get to these operators, you'll see that you can add variables. That can get tricky. What we really want is wait until our score is going to equal a certain number. So we want this double spaced equaling a certain number. And right here, we can place our variable. It's confusing because it looks like you would type into it, but that is a space that if you go back to your variables, you can drag score right into there. And I'm going to change this to 10. So this one, it's maybe not the most intuitive to figure out, but once you see the code, hopefully it makes a lot of sense why this would work. So we're going to start with the nebula, wait until the score equals 10, and then we'll say what we want it to do next. So after the score equals 10, I want it to change the backdrop to be the galaxy. Okay. So hopefully this will all work. I can try it. Hopefully it doesn't take me too long to actually hit this thing twice so we can check it. You'll see that it went ahead and started at the, oh, this is going to be embarrassing. And hit up the nebula. All right, I need it to score 6. Oh man. All right, score 11. And it should switch the backdrop. Okay, and it did it. So this is good. Now we can actually problem solve like I've had to do a few other times here. This is pretty common for at least me. Maybe there's other people who you just do it the first time and it works perfectly. For me, it kind of tends to be a little bit of guesswork. So we go there and then switch backdrop to nebula. That worked. Wait until score equals that. Switch backdrop to, make sure that I have my galaxy. Okay. Well, let's just try it one more time and see. Oh, well, now my score is already there. All right, so let's reset the score. That's actually an important one that we didn't do. So right here, when this is clicked, we need to make sure that we're setting our score back to 0. So I'm going to start a new control for this. So control, change score, variables. I want to actually, when it starts, I want to set my variable to 0. You can just plug it in there. Set score to 0. So hopefully then that sets it back for us. Oh, I know exactly what happened, and I will explain it in a second. Okay. There we go. So what happened here, and this is where it gets tricky because we tend to think that our computers and our programs are really smart, but they're only as smart as our programmer, and I made a silly mistake. I said wait until score equals 10, but I also set my code in such a way that it skipped past the number 10 altogether. Because I had started with my +1, I actually went from 6 to 11 on my score. So since I never hit 10, the program didn't know to do that line of code. So now that we fixed that problem, once you hit 10, it went ahead and switched to our galaxy. Right, so you can see how then you could continue this, wait until score equals 20, and set up a new backdrop. I think I saw that a chat was in there. All right. Yeah, forever could have worked. I think it was just that it skipped past that. Somebody was giving me suggestions, which I really appreciate, because if I'm making a silly mistake, please let me know. All right. So now that we've got this, maybe I just want to add a little sign that comes up and says, level up, you've done a good job, some sort of a victory message. If you want a message that comes up at a certain time in the game but is hidden at the beginning, it's kind of counterintuitive, but one of the easiest ways to do this is actually to just create another object or a sprite. And then we can code that sprite to show up at certain points during the game. So I'm going to show you the actual paint because I want to kind of make my own message here. Rather than choosing a sprite, I'm going to go ahead and create my own. I'm going to just write with text and choose this pixel. We'll see how big it comes up. I'll just write level up. Now this doesn't look very big to me, so maybe I will change the size, make it nice and big. You'll see the preview of it comes up on my screen. All right, I can change the color to be whatever I want. Ooh, that green looked kind of video gamey. All right, I think I like the look of that. So once you've figured out what you want your little victory message to be, we can then go back and actually code it. So at the very beginning, I don't want this level up to show. I'm going to go ahead and start it. So at the beginning, I obviously don't want this to be here. So we can just go to our events, because again, we're doing what do we want it to do when it starts. When the flag is clicked, I want it to just completely go away. So I'm going to go into our looks, appearance, whether or not it's there is the way it's looking. And if you scroll down, you'll see a show and a hide button. So I'm going to go, I want it to be hidden right at the beginning. But then once that backdrop changes, I want it to go ahead and flip and show for a few seconds. So that's a different event, right? When backdrop switches. So you'll see this has been kind of developed so that it's easier to make little video games. So a lot of the intuitive code that you would want, they've already made for you. So when the backdrop switches to Galaxy, which would have been the next level, I'm going to go back to my looks and say that it can be shown. But then, of course, thinking ahead, I don't want it to show forever. I just want it to show and then go away so you can kind of keep playing the game and hopefully level up again. So I'm going to wait, oops, in my controls, I'm going to wait for 2 seconds and then back to my looks, I want to hide yet again. All right, so hopefully this all works this time. We can test it out. All right, it hid, so that's a good sign. Oh goodness. Everybody's probably looking at me like, all right, then it says level up, and I've done it again, and then I can keep playing the game. Keep on adding different levels. You can make it harder. You could make this crystal move faster. Right now it's gliding 1 second to a random position. If I wanted it to move faster, I want it to take less time to get to that random position. So I could change that to 0.5 seconds. And then it's going to move really fast all over the screen. So you can see how you can really alter this or completely change it to be whatever you wanted, right? You could do an underwater scene, you could do a in the sky scene. It's easily adaptable. All right. So I'm going to stay on here for a few more minutes and answer any questions in the chat box. But that kind of concludes our little tutorial for today. I'm so happy that you guys all joined. I hope you found it useful. If I went too fast, like I said, the video will be posted, and we're also going to share some additional resources. Sprite Scratch has a lot of educational resources for everybody. They have other tutorials that walk you through more complicated games or other animations that you can do with this program. So it's a lot of fun. I would highly suggest it. Kids pick it up so ridiculously fast, and it really is a good introduction into the world of coding. So like I said, if you have any questions, I will hang around and answer them in the chat box. Otherwise, I hope you'll come back and join us. Next week, we're going to be doing some upcycling crafts. So that should be a lot of fun, and keep tuned for everything else the museum has going on virtually for you guys. Okay, so let's see, I had a question whether or not we could make enemies. You can, you would add another sprite, and then you could add, rather than a score, you could alter a variable to actually be a health gauge. So maybe once you reached, or rather a damage, once I reached damage 10, maybe you lose the game. So there's definitely a way to do that. I would say a sprite that's an enemy, and instead of making this variable a score, I would make it a damage count. All right, if I'm not seeing any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we will see you again virtually soon. Stay well, everybody.